I never claimed to be a backpacker or some outdoorsman before my 2020 hike, but hey, you gotta be willing to suck at something new if you're gonna progress, right? Alright, 3 times I was legitimately scared on the Appalachian Trail. The first time was in a little town called Hiawassee. We'll put it in the stranger danger category. The second time was hiking out of Damascus, Virginia. Call that lost and found. And the third time I was legitimately scared on the Appalachian Trail was in Vermont when I was hit with a late snowstorm and underprepared as far as gear was concerned. So, welcome to Hiawassee. Small little town about 70 miles into the Appalachian Trail. Gut Hooks, or Far Out Now, describes it as a small town on the shore of Lake Chateau near the border of North Carolina. You need to get a shuttle into this town as it is pretty far away from the trailhead. I believe it's Dix Creek. So me and a couple of guys I've been hiking with, Groovy and Redbush, decided we were gonna pull off trail and slide into Hiawassee for some good food and a nice good night's sleep at a hotel room. And right before we hit the shuttle, an older guy named Paul as well, funny, he actually had a frying pan too, but he asked if he could join us and split the cost of the hotel room with us, and we said, hey, why not? So he came along with us, and it ended up being a long night. Turns out, old Paul was a meth head, stayed awake the entire night, spreading all of his stuff out on the hotel room floor. Actually asked us if we wanted to smoke some meth that night before we went out to eat, so we all were on edge after that for the entire night. And then that next morning, when the shuttle dropped us off on trail, me and Groovy and Redbush decided we were gonna beat feet and dust him. And that's what we did. So, maybe not near-death experience, but it definitely had us scared, and it's definitely something to look out for on your thru hike. This probably looks familiar to some of you out there. Home of Trail Days Festival and the famous Broken Fiddle Hostel. Damascus, Virginia is located about 470 miles in if you're heading northbound. Gut Hooks describes it as one of the premier trail towns on the Appalachian Trail, and it was a premier town from my experience. One of the only times I got really drunk on trail. A lot of people stayed at the Broken Fiddle, and I had more than one too many beers. Now the next morning when I hiked out, I was ready to get to the shelter that evening as quick as possible because I felt horrible. So I was hiking fast with my head down, and apparently the Appalachian Trail now goes around the right side of Iron Mountain, I believe, and the old Appalachian Trail goes to the left. The old trail, you still see blazes. They're a little, off-white, sort of yellowish looking, but I followed that old trail for at least 12 miles in. Eventually hit a point where I got frantic. I didn't have Gut Hooks yet, so I was trying to scroll through this PDF file of the, Appalachian Trail book, and wasn't telling me anything. So I eventually decided to turn around and beat feet back until I found something that looked familiar. Now, I planned on popping back out on the trail and seeing somebody I knew or something that told me which way to go, but I ended up popping out on a road, a blacktop road, and luckily I was able to hitchhike back into Damascus. And I went ahead and got another hostel that night, decided I'd go ahead and get a fresh night's sleep and try again in the morning. Now, this is the event that prompted me to go ahead and spend the money on Gut Hooks. Before then, I didn't really see the value, but I certainly did after that night. My most intense on-trail crisis occurred when I was crossing the border of Massachusetts going into Vermont. The night before, I pulled into Williamstown, Massachusetts for a quick little resupply, got back on trail. Maybe a half a mile in, I made camp, set up my hammock. The weather forecast for the next day showed rain, so I went to sleep and woke up to snow. Checked my weather app and the forecast had changed to snow, and initially I thought, ooh, this will be funner than hiking in rain. So I packed up my stuff. I'll never forget this morning. Ice on the hammock tarp. It was really challenging to get it back in the bag. My hands were like ice. And I took off and the snow was coming down, nothing crazy. Maybe a mile into my hike, the snow started to fall a lot heavier, and it didn't take long for trail to be completely covered. Also, snow was sticking to the trees, so the white blazes were essentially useless. And this was my first experience being out in nature in, heavy snow like this coming down. Now, there was a couple different times when I veered from the trail, and the first time it wasn't too serious. I was able to turn around and get back, no problem. The second time proved to be a little bit more of a challenge. Once I realized I was really off trail, I decided I would kneel down and pull out my phone to try to use gut hooks. This wasn't the first time I had tried. I was unsuccessful before because as the snow would fall and hit my phone, it would turn into a puddle and make my phone impossible to use. This time I thought I would crouch down and huddle over my phone and do everything I could to stop the snow from coming into the phone. My hands were still wet, they were really cold, they really weren't working like I needed them to work. And I gotta be honest, a little bit of panic set in. Maybe the right thing to do would have been to pitch my hammock and tarp, get some dry clothes on right there and wait it out. But frantic me wanted to find the trail. I wanted to know where I was at, so I was frantically looking. Eventually I gave up on the phone, put it up, and at this point my hands and feet had gotten so cold I figured I had to be moving or a frostbite would be a real possibility. So eventually I found the trail. I feel like I had an angel on my shoulder that day. But after I got back on trail, I saw a sign that told me there was a shelter about a half a mile away. And when I finally made it there, it was like another, 0.4 miles down a spur trail to get to the shelter, and that was challenging to navigate as well. And I remember that shelter, Seth Warner Shelter. It's the first one into Vermont, about 1,610 miles into the trail if you're heading northbound. There I waited out the snowstorm, finally got some dry clothes on. It took a while. It's pretty challenging when your hands don't work. And then as I was beginning to relax, a few other guys came in. First, it was a section hiker, guy from New York. And second, we had a little group of guys section hiking. They were doing the whole trail in sections. And I really remember one of the guys, his trail name was Bill Be Positive. He actually sent me a care package to a hostel a few days later with some sealskin socks in there. They really did the job for keeping my feet warm for the rest of my hike in 2021. Hope the socks work out. Also, a cap needs more beads. Got these in Israel, and they serve me well. Time for thee to continue on the journey. A few other small things I hope you can use. I know fruits and veggies are hard to come by on trail. I throw a handful of this freeze-dried stuff in with ramen. Stay safe, enjoy the journey, and keep me updated. Bill, be positive. Most people might not consider these near-death experiences. I get it. For me, number 3 was definitely a near-death experience. Now, when I got lost in Damascus, I wasn't thinking, oh my gosh, I might die or lose fingers and toes. I was just thinking, damn, it's gonna take me an extra, day and a half to figure out where I'm going if I don't figure this out. So, I feel like all in all, the Appalachian Trail is a pretty safe place. especially if you're not, drinking and coming off of hard drugs like I was. God knows my brain was not firing on all cylinders for that first section in 2020. Yeah, guys, I hope y'all enjoyed. Y'all subscribe and stay tuned for more.